The night my son called to tell me his wife had fallen down the stairs again, I did not cry. I did not rush to the hospital in a panic. I sat very still at my kitchen table in Savannah, Georgia, held the phone against my ear, and listened to the silence underneath his words. That silence told me everything his words were hiding. My name is Dorothy Callahan. I am 63 years old. For 31 years, I worked as a licensed family therapist in private practice, and before that, 6 years as a counselor at a women's shelter in Atlanta. I have sat across from hundreds of people in the darkest seasons of their lives. I have learned that the most dangerous lies are never the ones people tell out loud. They are the ones people tell themselves, quietly, in the dark, just to make it through another morning. I never imagined I would need that knowledge to understand what was happening inside my own son's house. My son Marcus was 36 that spring. He married a woman named Claire 4 years earlier, and I loved her before she ever became my daughter-in-law. She was warm in the way that fills a room without trying. She taught 4th grade in Beaufort, South Carolina, and her students sent her drawings in the summer because they missed her that much. When she laughed with her whole body. She was the kind of woman who remembered your coffee order and brought you a cup without being asked. When Marcus brought her home the first Thanksgiving, she helped me in the kitchen without making it feel like an obligation. She asked about my work. She listened the way people listen when they actually want to know. My late husband, Raymond, God rest him, leaned over to me after dinner and whispered that Marcus had done something right. Raymond passed 3 years into their marriage. A heart attack, sudden and complete, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Claire held my hand at the funeral longer than anyone else did. She did not say the things people usually say. She simply stayed close. That meant more than I have ever been able to tell her. Marcus had always been a good man, gentle-natured, the way his father was gentle, the kind of man who carries grocery bags for elderly neighbors and means it. But grief changes the architecture of a person. After Raymond died, something shifted in Marcus. He became quieter, more guarded. He threw himself into work, long hours, longer silences. I told myself he was processing loss the way men sometimes do, by going inward, by becoming useful, by staying busy until the pain tired itself out. I told myself that for nearly 2 years. I was wrong. The first time I noticed something was off with Claire was at Easter, 14 months after Raymond's funeral. She arrived at my house wearing a blouse with a collar higher than the Georgia heat had any business tolerating. She moved carefully, the way people move when something hurts, and they've decided not to mention it. When I hugged her, she stiffened for just a half second before softening. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I caught it. I said nothing that day. In my work, I learned early that naming a thing too soon can close every door you need to stay open. So I watched. I waited. I paid attention the way I had been trained to pay attention, not just to what people say, but to the space around what they don't. Over the months that followed, Claire called me less. Those Sunday afternoon phone calls, the ones where she'd tell me funny things her students did or ask my opinion on some recipe she was trying, began to thin out. When I called her, she answered quickly, spoke pleasantly, and found reasons to end the conversation within 10 minutes. I noticed she stopped mentioning her friends by name. She stopped talking about her colleagues. When I asked about her sister Ruth, who lived in Charleston and had been her closest companion since childhood, Claire said they were just both so busy. Claire had never been too busy for Ruth in her life. Marcus started answering her phone sometimes when I called. Not every time, but enough. He always had a reason. She's resting. She's in the bath. She had a long week. Each reason, on its own, was perfectly ordinary. Stacked together, they formed a wall I was not supposed to notice. I noticed. Then came the stories. The elbow bumped against the car door. The wrist twisted, moving furniture. The stairs. There were a lot of stairs in their house, apparently. Claire had apparently become remarkably clumsy, in a way she had never been in the 35 years of her life before she married my son. I want to be honest about something, because honesty is the only thing this story is worth. There was a period of months where I made myself believe alternative explanations. Marcus was my child. I had held him when he was 6 hours old. I had watched him cry at his father's funeral. The mind protects what it loves, and mine was no different. I constructed reasons, stress, grief, growing pains of a difficult marriage. I was the woman who had counseled abuse survivors for decades, and I still found ways to look away from the possibility that my son had become someone I didn't recognize. That is not something I am proud of, but I tell you so you understand that this doesn't only happen to other families. It happens in the houses of people who should know better. It happens in the houses of therapists. It happens everywhere. Silence is more comfortable than truth. The moment my looking away ended was a Wednesday afternoon in October. I had driven up to Beaufort unannounced, something I tried not to do as a rule, but I had a ceramic dish of mine Claire had borrowed for a gathering, and I was making a lemon pound cake that weekend. And I had a reason, a small, ordinary reason, to stop by. Claire answered the door, and for 1/2 second before her expression arranged itself into welcome, I saw what was underneath it. Exhaustion so deep it had become structural, a kind of hollowness that lives behind the eyes of people who have been managing their own fear for so long that the management itself has become the personality. She was wearing a cardigan. It was 68 degrees. We sat in the kitchen, and she made tea, and she talked about her class and a parent-teacher conference coming up. And she was pleasant and warm and entirely not herself. I listened, and then, because I am who I am, and because I loved her too much to keep pretending, I set my cup down and I asked the question I had been not asking for the better part of a year. Claire, honey, are you safe in this house? The teapot was still in her hand. She set it down very slowly. She didn't look at me. She looked at the counter, at the tile, at nothing in particular. She was quiet for long enough that the quiet became its own answer. I don't know what you mean, she said. Her voice was steady. That was the most frightening part. She had practiced steady. Yes, you do, I said quietly. And I need you to know that whatever you tell me, I am on your side. I am not here to judge. I am not here to fix anything today. I just need you to know that you can tell me the truth. She cried then. Not dramatically, not with sobs, but the way people cry when they've been holding something for so long that a small release is all the body can manage. Tears ran down her face, and she kept looking at the counter, and she didn't move to wipe them. It started small, she said finally. It always starts small, right? That's what you'd probably say. I said nothing. I let her speak. She told me about the first year of marriage, how good it was, how she had felt chosen, cherished, how Marcus had been the most attentive man she'd ever been with, how she had believed that attentiveness was love, and had not yet learned to see it as something else. Then Raymond got sick, and Marcus began to change, and Claire absorbed the change the way a person absorbs weather. She didn't choose it, she simply was in it. She told me about the night he grabbed her arm because she had mentioned meeting an old friend for dinner without checking with him first. She told me about the apology afterward, the flowers, the version of Marcus who returned for 2 weeks before the next incident. She told me about the way anger moved through him now, quiet and controlled, nothing like a temper tantrum, nothing she could point to and say, this right here is the thing. It was subtle. It was surgical. It took her months to understand she was afraid of her own husband, because he had never given her one single obvious reason to be. I drove home to Savannah that evening with my ceramic dish in the back seat, and a clarity inside me that was cold and absolute. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a while before going inside. My son had been hurting my daughter-in-law, not the way strangers hurt each other, not in ways that left clear bruises and obvious evidence, but in the way that quieter violence operates, the kind that disassembles a person from the inside, the kind that leaves the victim doubting her own memory of what happened, because nothing was ever dramatic enough to feel real. I had spent 31 years of my professional life working with women in exactly this situation, and my son had put my daughter-in-law inside it. I knew what I could not do. I could not call Marcus and confront him. Not yet. People who use control as a weapon do not respond to confrontation by surrendering. They respond by escalating, and their first escalation is almost always directed at the person closest to them. If I called Marcus that night, Claire would pay for it, so I did what I had always done in my practice. I made a plan, methodical, patient, and invisible until the moment it wasn't. I called Claire every day. Not long calls, nothing that would draw Marcus's suspicion. Brief, ordinary calls. How are the kids today? How is the weather over there? Did you catch that thing on the news? Inside those ordinary calls, I was building something, a line, a thread, a way for her to feel that someone was consistently on the other side. I started documenting every mention of an accident, every canceled visit with a vague explanation, dates, times, what she said, what I observed. I kept a small notebook that I locked in the drawer of my bedside table. In 30 years of practice, I had learned that truth without documentation is just a feeling. Documentation turns it into evidence. I reached out carefully to Ruth, Claire's sister. I asked, without stating my concerns directly, whether she had noticed changes in Claire over the past couple of years. Ruth went quiet in the way people go quiet when they have been waiting for someone to ask. She said she had tried to bring it up with Claire twice, and Claire had brushed her off both times. She said she felt like she was watching her sister disappear and had no idea how to reach her. I told Ruth I was working on something. I told her to keep calling Claire, to stay in her peripheral vision, to not say anything to Marcus. She agreed without asking me to explain myself further. That is the thing about people who love someone in danger. They don't need much convincing. They have already been worried alone for too long, and they are relieved to find out someone else sees it too. 3 months into this quiet work, Marcus called me. He wanted to bring Claire down to Savannah for Thanksgiving. He was warm on the phone, charming, in the effortless way. He had always been charming. I agreed immediately. I told him I was looking forward to it. I did not let my voice carry anything he could use. They arrived the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Claire looked thinner. Her eyes moved to Marcus before she answered questions, a habit so embedded she didn't seem to notice she was doing it. When I complimented her earrings, she glanced at him before she smiled. He hadn't said a word, hadn't moved a muscle, but she checked anyway. That check was its own testimony. Thanksgiving dinner was surface pleasant. Marcus dominated the conversation the way water fills a container, naturally, completely, leaving no room for anything else. When Claire began a sentence about something that had happened at school, something funny, something that was hers, he finished it for her. She let him. After dinner, while Marcus watched football in the living room, Claire and I washed dishes together. I handed her a glass to dry and I said, very quietly, without looking at her, "I have been paying attention. I want you to know that." She didn't respond, but her hand stopped moving for a moment, and then she dried the glass with great care, and she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, the way a person nods when they've given up expecting to be seen, and then suddenly are. That nod told me she was still in there. That mattered more than I can say. The break came from somewhere I did not anticipate. A former colleague of Marcus's, a man named Gerald who had worked with him at his firm 3 years earlier before leaving, under circumstances that had always seemed vague, reached out to me directly. I still am not certain how he found my contact information, but he did, and he sent a message through my old practice website, which I had kept up mostly out of habit. He said he had something I needed to hear. He said he had been sitting on it for 2 years because he wasn't sure it was his place. He said watching someone else stay silent had finally made him decide it was. We spoke on the phone for an hour and 40 minutes. Gerald told me about an incident at a work retreat 3 years earlier. He told me about a version of Marcus that the family holiday visits had never shown me. A version that emerged in certain contexts, when he felt challenged, when he felt his authority questioned in front of others. Gerald had seen Marcus corner a junior colleague in a hallway and speak to him in a voice so quiet and controlled that no one passing by would have suspected anything. He said the junior colleague had been visibly shaking. He told me something else, something that rearranged my understanding of the entire architecture. He told me about Marcus's father, not Raymond. Raymond had been Marcus's stepfather, the man who raised him, the man I had loved for 28 years. Marcus's biological father was a man named Leonard, whom I had divorced when Marcus was not yet 2 years old. I had left Leonard because of what he did behind closed doors, and I had left so early, so deliberately, that I had spent 3 decades believing Marcus had been too young to carry any of it. Gerald told me that Marcus had spoken about Leonard often during that period at the firm, not with bitterness, with something closer to reverence. He spoke about Leonard as a man who knew how to maintain order, a man whose family respected him because they understood the cost of not doing so. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up the phone. I had protected Marcus from Leonard. I had built him a different life, a safe life, a life with Raymond who was steady and kind and present. And somewhere along the way, in some interior place I had never been able to reach, Marcus had gone looking for his biological father and found something to admire. I will not tell you that understanding erases accountability. It does not. A wound in your history explains some things and excuses nothing. But it gave me the fuller picture, and the fuller picture told me this was not going to be solved by a single confrontation or a single conversation. This was going to require something complete. I spoke with an attorney. I helped Claire understand what documentation she had rights to, what a protected process of separation could look like, what she was legally entitled to. I coordinated quietly with Ruth, who began creating reasons for Claire to spend time in Charleston, building a geography of safety before the word safety was ever spoken out loud between them. The most important conversation I had was with Claire herself, on a Tuesday evening in January when Marcus was traveling for work. I drove up to Beaufort, and we sat in her kitchen again, the same table, the same chairs, but something had shifted. She sat straighter. She had started calling Ruth more. She had started writing things down herself. I said to her, "You do not have to decide anything tonight. But I need you to hear something clearly. What has been happening to you is not ordinary difficulty. It is not a rough patch or a communication problem or 2 people who need to try harder. What has been happening to you is abuse. It is slow, and it is quiet, and it is real, and it is not your fault, and you do not have to endure it as a condition of being loved." She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were full. "He's your son," she said. "And you are my daughter," I said. "I chose Raymond. I will always be grateful I chose him. And Claire, I chose you too. That choice does not change because this is hard." She cried properly then. Not the small, contained tears of October, but something deeper and more complete. The kind of crying that happens when a person finally sets down a weight they've carried so long they forgot it wasn't part of their body. When she was ready, we talked practically. Steps, sequence, timing. I told her she was not alone. I told her Ruth was ready. I told her I had spoken to an attorney. I told her that whenever she decided she was ready to move, there was a place for her to move to, and people who would be there when she arrived. Marcus did not see it coming. That was partly by design, and partly because people who are accustomed to controlling others rarely believe those people capable of coordinated action. He had systematically dismantled Claire's confidence in her own judgment. He had not considered that her judgment had simply moved underground, where he couldn't reach it. Claire filed in March. She had been staying with Ruth in Charleston for 11 days before Marcus understood what was happening. By the time he tried to reach her through me, through mutual friends, through her school, through channels, she had quietly closed one by one over the preceding weeks. The legal process was already in motion. He called me the night it became real to him. He was not the voice I had heard on Thanksgiving, pleasant and effortless. He was frightened. He was angry beneath the fright. He told me I had interfered. He told me I had destroyed his marriage. He told me I didn't understand what had been going on between the two of them. I let him talk. I had counseled people long enough to know that this moment, however painful it was also diagnostic. What a person says when they believe they have lost control of a situation tells you exactly who they are. When he finished, I spoke. "Marcus," I said, "I love you. That has not changed, and it will not change. And because I love you, I am going to tell you the truth. What you did to Claire is the same thing Leonard did to me. And I left Leonard because I refused to let it become the water I swam in for the rest of my life. Claire made the same decision. I helped her make it because that is what I should have done, and I am deeply sorry it took me as long as it did to do it." The silence on his end of the line lasted a long time. "I'm not Leonard," he said finally. His voice was different, smaller. "I know you don't believe you are," I said. "That is exactly what makes this so serious. Marcus, I am asking you to get help. Real help. Not to save the marriage, that is Claire's decision, and hers alone, but for yourself. Because you are carrying something that does not belong to you, and if you don't put it down deliberately, it will follow you into every room you ever enter." He didn't respond to that. He ended the call. That was not the end of everything, because these things never end cleanly. There were difficult months, legal proceedings, moments when Claire doubted herself again, when the trained voice in her head told her she was being dramatic, she was being ungrateful, she was throwing away something real. I sat with her through those moments. Ruth sat with her. We did not push. We simply stayed. Marcus eventually entered therapy. I don't know what he has done with it. I hope he has done something real. I hope, with the particular complicated hope of a mother who loves her child and has also had to hold the door open for the person her child was hurting. Those two things live in me at the same time. I have stopped expecting them to resolve into something simpler. Claire lives in Charleston now, 2 blocks from Ruth. She went back to teaching in September. Her students made her a card on her first day back that said, "We missed you, Miss Claire," in 11 different colors of marker, and she sent me a photo of it. I have it on my refrigerator. She called me last Sunday. Not a short call, a long one, the kind we used to have. She told me about a new colleague she likes, and a parent who had written her a note that made her tear up, and a plant she had bought for her apartment that she was worried she was already overwatering. She laughed at herself about the plant. She laughed with her whole body. That laugh is the sound of a person who has been given back to herself. I am telling this story because silence protects the wrong people. I spent my career telling other families that, and then I spent nearly 2 years in the grip of the same silence I had counseled others out of. The love we have for the people closest to us is the most powerful thing in our lives, and it is also the thing most capable of making us look away from what we cannot bear to see. That is not weakness. It is human, but it cannot be permanent. If you are someone who sees what I saw in Claire, in those early months, in the high collars and the careful silences and the eyes that check before they smile, please don't wait as long as I did. You don't have to have the whole plan. You just have to be the person who asks the question, "Are you safe?" You'd be surprised how much it means to someone who has been waiting, in silence, for someone to finally ask. Before I go, I want to leave you with the 5 things this experience taught me that I wish I had known sooner. First, control never introduces itself as control. It introduces itself as love, as protection, as reasonable concern, and by the time it shows its real shape, the person inside it has often lost the ability to see clearly. Second, the people closest to someone being harmed are not helpless. Quiet, consistent presence is its own form of protection. Stay in their peripheral vision. Keep the thread alive. Don't give up when they push you away, because that push is often the fear talking, not the person. Third, loving someone who causes harm does not require you to protect them from consequences. Accountability is not the opposite of love. Sometimes it is the most loving thing available. Fourth, if you are in a situation like Claire was in, please hear this clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. You are not the problem. Abuse that doesn't leave visible marks is still abuse, and you deserve to be believed, starting with yourself. Fifth, healing is not a single moment. It is a direction. It is the plant on the windowsill you're worried you're overwatering. It is the Sunday phone call that lasts longer than you planned. It is laughing at yourself again and meaning it. What did this story bring up for you, and what city are you watching from? If it stayed with you, please share it. Someone in your life may need to hear it more than you know.